This is from Julie. First, I want to congratulate you. Your first 3 books of the series, Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, are great. I particularly like the fact that you based your story on a way of life which really existed. Like you say, Torak's world is that which existed 6,000 years ago. Then, I have a question. In his book, Brother Wolf, A Forgotten Promise, Jim Brandenburg says that ravens call wolves to kill an animal or open a corpse. I quote, for example, "The ravens caw to shout at themselves, but I think that they are also shouting to attract the predators, especially the wolves, towards the intact carcasses." And the natives, notably Inuits, assert that ravens really escort wolves in their movements and while hunting. Did you know this link between raven and wolf, and is it for this reason that Torak is part of the Wolf Clan and Renn part of the Raven Clan? I wish you a good continuation, and please excuse me for my bad English. I'm 16 years old, and I'm French.
Well, I think your English is superb. My French is a whole lot worse. Yes, thank you for this. This is fascinating. Yes, I was aware of the association between ravens and wolves in the wild because I've read a lot of studies of wolves and indeed of ravens. It wasn't actually consciously, though, the reason that Torak is wolf and Renn is raven. That just came to me naturally. Quite often when you're writing stories, you don't think of these things until afterwards. So it just seemed to me natural that Torak obviously should think he was part of the Wolf Clan because he's Wolf brother, and that his friend would be Raven Clan. It was only afterwards I realised, oh yes, of course, that's because wolves and ravens in the wild are often associated and play together sometimes. So thank you, that's a very interesting question.
This comes from Wolf Brother Torak.
Hi, you have written another work of art, and I would like to know what inspired you to write the books.
Well, thank you for that. What inspired me to write the books is, I think, described on my personal website. In general, though, it was my love of wolves and the Stone Age as a child, and then meeting a very large black bear in Southern California.
Now this comes from Zainuk Thum, who writes, "Dear Michelle Paver, I'm 14 and you are among my favourite authors, along with J.K. Rowling, Christopher Paolini, Cliff McNeish and many more. I would also like to add that I'm something of a writer myself. I've written several things and I'm in the middle of writing another. Carrying on, I'm a real bookworm and I do love the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness. My favourite particularly is Spirit Walker, and I loved this book because I really enjoyed learning about Torak's uncle, though quite unpleasant, and reading how Torak really bonded with him without knowing that he was his uncle. And to tell you the truth, Tenris really reeled me in with his kindness. I must admit, he was a great character. What I wanted to know is what your favourite book out of your series is so far. Also, if you lived in Torak's era, would you live in the far north, to the sea, in the open forest, or in the deep forest? And I wanted to know what the 7th unnamed Soul Eater's name was. Finally, I also wanted to know what books you read when you were about my age. I've been looking for a good suggestion and couldn't find anything else, so I decided to immerse myself into Charles Dickens' Great Expectations."
Well, thank you for all that. Taking it in reverse, as it were, what books did I read when I was about your age, 14? Gosh, it's such a long time ago, it's hard to remember. I think I was quite keen on Jane Austen. I'd just discovered Jane Austen, and that doesn't sound very Stone Age, does it? But I had just discovered some of the Victorians. I was never a fan of Charles Dickens myself, but I did enjoy Jane Eyre, the Brontes, and of course The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien. You also asked me what my favourite book of the series is so far. I don't really have one. You know, I love writing each of these books, and each one has its own charm. If I lived in Torak's era, I think I'd probably go for the open forest. I'd love to visit the far north, but I feel the cold rather a lot, so I think I'd prefer the open forest. And you want to know the name of the 7th unnamed Soul Eater, and you're not going to find that out until probably Ghost Hunter, so I'm afraid you've got a bit of a long wait.
This comes from Firen.
Hi Michelle, I love your books. Where did you get the inspiration for the names from? I always have trouble thinking of them. Also, what gave you the idea for animal clans?
Well, the names, as I think I mentioned in a previous question, I just had to make up. Took a long time. Some of my favourite ones, though, in fact one of my favourites is Finkedin. I was incredibly pleased after days of trying to find his name when I finally came up with that one. What gave me the idea for the animal clans is an interesting question. I got the idea, as I got many of the ideas for the beliefs in Torak's world, from more recent hunter-gatherers. In this case, from some of the American Indian clans on the Pacific North coast of America. And many of them name their clans still after animals and plants. There's a wolf clan, there's a killer whale clan, and they believe that they were descended from that particular creature. So that seemed to be a very natural and believable thing to have in Torak's world.
This comes from Wolf of the Forest. Okay, so my question is kind of weird, but anyway, can you talk to wolves or understand them in some way? I do animal impressions of horses, dogs, cats, and wolves. And I was just wondering, because every time I do a cat impression, my next-door neighbour's cat answers. Please, I've always wanted to know, and, I love your books. Outcast is amazing.
Yes, can I talk to animals? Well, I can't talk to them as well as Torak can. But as you've probably gathered, there's a certain amount that we can all do by communicating with animals. I know a little bit of wolf communication. I know not to look directly into their eyes in a hard kind of stare, because that's rather impolite if you're a wolf. Certain parts of the body they don't really like being touched if they're adult wolves, like their paws and the top of their head. It's not very good wolf etiquette to pat them on the head. But I don't know as much as Torak. So I only know what any informed person these days knows. Torak is the real expert.
This comes from Renn's fan.
Hello. Firstly, I love your books, and now I would like to ask something. Your books have made me love wolves, but is it wrong to keep one as a pet? I don't have one, but I would really like your opinion. Thank you.
Well, Renn's fan, I'm absolutely delighted that you love wolves. I think they're massively misunderstood creatures, and we've demonised them for far too long. Is it wrong to keep one as a pet? Definitely yes, it is wrong. I'm sorry to be so severe, but there's a couple of reasons. The main one is wolves are wild animals in the main, and if you want to keep them in captivity, you'd need to keep them in a large area where they can run around, like at the UK Wolf Conservation Trust. And the other reason is that they're pack animals. They live in packs, in big family groups. They're very social, and a lone wolf would be very miserable as a pet, even if he had a very nice and understanding mistress, as I'm sure you would be.
This comes from Farrell. Firstly, I just have to say I love your Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series and find myself wishing I lived in a world like that. Keep it up, I love these books. My question is about the other Soul Eater, the one who died in the fire and was supposed to have been obsessed with demons. My question is whether we will find out more about this character, and if it doesn't ruin any storylines, tell us who he is. Just wondering, though, in case you were interested and saw in the paper the other day, that 130-million-year-old crocodile skull has been found fossilised in the rubble of a rockfall in Dorset, and is regarded as proof that England once had crocs. It seems likely that a creature such as a crocodile would have stayed an inhabitant of England for a considerable amount of time, till, maybe, a world 6,000 years ago. Just thought that might give you some inspiration.
Well, thank you very much for that. Taking the crocodile question first of all, there's a big difference between 130 million years ago and 6,000 years ago, and I think your assumption that it might well have stayed around as an inhabitant until 6,000 years ago, I think that's a little suspect. We know from certain other studies that the world of 6,000 years ago was similar to our own in terms of climate at this latitude, so I don't think there would have been any crocs in Torak's world at that time. Yes, everybody seems to be quite keen on finding out about the seventh Soul Eater. All I can tell you is that you're going to find out a little bit more in Oathbreaker and a lot more in Ghost Hunter. I really hope you don't guess it, but I'm not telling you any more. Sorry.
Now this question comes from Full Moon.
Can you relate to any of the people in your books?
I actually relate to all of the people in the books, because whenever I'm writing a scene, I'm thinking from the point of view of the people in that scene. So it's not just Torak and Renn and Wolf I'm relating to. I relate to each of the Soul Eaters, because I have to, because that's what you have to do when you make up characters as a writer. You have to make them real. So you have to think about what they like, what they don't like, what they want. So the answer is yes to all of them, but a good question.
This comes from Ring Seal. Dear Michelle, hi. I've always wanted to be an author. What would be the best advice to give me? Thank you.
Yikes. That's a big question. Well, the first thing to do is to read lots. because I don't think any author gets to become an author without being in love with words and seeing what words can achieve as used by different authors. The next thing to do is don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just write when you feel like it, and enjoy your writing, and write what you love. Write about what you love. And then the final thing is rewrite, and that will help you on your way towards becoming an author. Good luck.
Now this question comes from the Dark Mage.
Dear Michelle, I have 2 questions. Why wolf? I mean, why not any other animal? Have you simply always liked them, or are they just easier to fit in with the kind of story you were writing? How did you decide to go about writing a whole series of books, and what was your base? What did you know for definite that you would put in? Was it the idea of having clans and being back in Torak's time, or did you want, from the start, an adventure about a boy and his wolf?
I'll take the second question first. It's an interesting one. I actually started with the boy and the wolf, very definitely. I always start with the characters. The world comes later, and I think you can tell that, and that's the most important thing in a story. People read a story to find out what's happening to the characters because they care about them. The world is there to make it real, but I think it should be in that order, really. Why wolf? Why not any other animal? Well, I wanted a wolf when I was a child. I was very keen on wolves. I think that's the emotional reason why, and that's why Torak's friend had to be a wolf. In terms of the story, of course, it makes a lot of sense, because wolves are really clever and they're very good at hunting, and they'd be very useful as a friend or a pack brother. If Wolf was a horse or a deer or something, he wouldn't be as much use. I mean, they're not quite as bright as wolves, and they're not as good as defending their pack brothers. So for all those reasons, it has to be Wolf.
And now this question from Lupine Dream. I'm doing my senior exit project on wolves and was hoping you could give me some information about them. This project is very important. If I don't get a good grade, I won't be allowed to graduate high school. Mucho stresso! The topic is basically how wolves are an important part of our ecosystem. Okay, what I'd like to know is, how are wolves beneficial to the environment? Why is it important to conserve the species? How are wolves like humans? What are some ways you know of or can think of that could make living near wolves more enjoyable, i.e. for farmers who are worried about wolves eating their livestock?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to help you on this one, because I think the reason you've been given this project is so that you can go away and look it up. So all this information is readily available. There's a whole load of brilliant books on wolves. There's probably quite a lot on the internet as well. I'll give you one name, though. The wolf expert is a guy called David Meach. That's M-E-C-H. If you Google him, you'll probably come up with quite a lot of really first-rate information. So I'm sorry, it could take hours for me to give you all that information, and it's much better for you to look it up yourself, and then you'll have time to copy out what you need. But good luck.
And now this from Azula.
Just 2 quick questions. Will Aurek's rock have a role to play in any of the future books? Does the Viper arrowhead line tattoo go vertically or horizontally across the head?
The Viper clan tattoo goes vertically down the middle of the forehead. It's one of the more elegant clan tattoos, as you would expect from someone like Seshru. The Aurochs rock, which plays a minor part at the beginning of Wolf Brother, I've always planned it to have a small role in Ghost Hunter, and I hope that will come about, although I can't be definite, because of course until I've actually written the book I won't know for sure. But what an interesting question.
This comes from Rek. Hello, Michelle. In the newest book, Outcast, when the Wolf Clan appear, you describe their eyes. I think this is really cool, and I was wondering, because most of your books are as true as possible, is this the thing they put in the water true? And if it is, can I ask what it is? Thanks from Rek, also known as your fan, stupid enough to make the transferable tattoos permanent.
Wow, I wonder how on earth you managed that. Yes, the yellow eyes. I like those yellow eyes as well. There are various things that can turn your eyes yellow, so it is certainly feasible. I don't think I'm going to tell you what they are, because I don't want you poisoning yourself. But thanks for asking.
This comes from Divinity Wolf.
Hi, Michelle. I was wondering how much you actually understand wolves. I mean, I know you can't actually talk to them like Torak, but how much of their body language can you use to find out what they're feeling and what's happening in the pack, and where would be a good place to learn it? I'm also interested in the places you go to write. Do they inspire you with new ideas for your series? Would you recommend writing in different places as a good way of being inspired?
Well, first of all, the wolf question. I can tell quite a lot about how wolves are feeling and how they're interacting in the pack because I've got to know certain wolves, and that I think is part of the key, because all wolves are individuals, and I've observed certain wolves for over some years now, so I've got to know them as individuals, and that I think is the way you might learn yourself. There are certain places in England where that's assuming you are in England, where you can go and observe wolves. I go to the UK Wolf Conservation Trust. There are others, so that would be my advice there. Yes, the places where I go to on my research trips do help inspire ideas for the series. I know roughly what the story is going to be when I go. For example, when I was in northern Greenland, I got the idea for the black ice in Soul Eater from an area where there was black ice. I got the idea for the Seal Islands when I went to the Lofoten Islands in North Norway, because they're incredibly dramatic. And often I get ideas for parts of the plot when I come across things on my research trip. So yeah, it's a very good place for getting inspiration. Actually, for writing, I try to do that when I'm back home.
This comes from Bird of Prey. Just a few questions. I know the Viper clan tattoo is arrowheads across the forehead, but do they go up or across? And is each arrow linked to the other or separate? I know that the Red Deer and Beaver clans became extinct, but did there used to be also an elk clan? As elks are mentioned in the book, but there's no sign of a clan for them.
There probably was an elk clan, but it is extinct, and it died out quite a long time ago, which is why there's nothing except a vague memory of them with the clans that are living today. But you're right to mention extinct clans. The Viper Mage, the Viper clan tattoo, is vertical, and the arrowheads, as it were, are linked. So rather like the marking on a viper itself.
This comes from Chelsea.
Dear Michelle, your Chronicles of Ancient Darkness books are a captivating read. When you were younger, did you imagine being back in Torak's times, or did you imagine you were in a different place, like the Middle Ages?
I used to imagine myself back in all sorts of times, actually. I used to imagine myself in ancient Greece, and ancient Rome, and ancient Egypt, and the Viking times, and medieval times, and also Torak's times. I mean, one of the great things about the imagination is you can go wherever you like.
This comes from Betty Wolf Wren. What's your most cherished place? Is it where you have been to write, or is it just when you come home, or is it just some place that isn't really a place, but just a mood you like to be in when you're in a state of complete awe, if you know what I mean?
I don't think I really have one particular cherished place, because different places appeal to me at different times. I love forests. I adore forests. So certain forests have meant a great deal to me. I love the far north. I spent some of my summer up on an icebreaker going around Spitsbergen and the pack ice and seeing the polar bears up there. That was terrific too. There's a place I go to when I want to disappear and write, which is very small and quiet, and it's surrounded by trees, very mysterious, and my mobile phone doesn't work. That's, I suppose, one of my favourite places, because then I can just be alone with the characters. But it just depends on what mood I'm in.
Now this from Grey Hunter.
Dear Michelle, what genre are the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness? I've been pondering this for a long time, and I've come to the conclusion that they are probably historical fiction. Is this true? If not, please tell me what you think they are. Also, please could you tell me where the books are set, as I can't get a definite picture in my head as to what the characters look like.
Well, the genre, the kind of category of the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, that doesn't bother me too much, because that's something that other people can put them into, publishers, readers and things. Some people say they're fantasy. I wouldn't agree with that. I think they're reality. So I think you're probably along the right lines when you say historical fiction, although this, of course, I suppose is prehistorical fiction. Where are they set? That's a good question. They're set somewhere in northern Scandinavia. I know pretty much the latitude because I have to know which animals and plants are up there and when the seasons come and that sort of thing. But if you try to look for Torak's world on the map, you won't find it because I've moved mountains and I've changed the coastline and I've moved the rivers, and that's what you can do as a writer because I want it to be in your imagination. So it's somewhere in northern Scandinavia, but you can't find out exactly where.